This video is brought to you by Squarespace, an all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. Hello, heathens. My name is Mina, and today I might actually get censored by YouTube, so fingers crossed. This has been a subject I've been wanting to discuss for a long time now. I think ever since I saw Saltburn, which came out in late 2023. Oh my God, time flies so fast. I remember watching Barry Keoghan sucking up Jacob Elordi's bathwater like it was just yesterday. Saltburn wasn't my favorite movie of the year. That award goes to Wonka. Just kidding. But I did love Wonka, and I will not be taking any more slander about that. Favorite 2023 movie for me, I think, was actually The Holdovers or La Chimera. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. Okay, rewind. I had a great time watching Saltburn in theaters. I loved the stylistic choices because I grew up on Tumblr. And also I went to the theater with a group of friends and we went to one of those dine-in theaters. So I was nibbling on my little chicken Caesar salad. I think I had a milkshake because I will always order one when presented the option. The theater was packed. I had no idea what I was walking into because I think this was like the first week that it was released. And I was just not expecting any kind of like psychosexual thriller. I was surprised by it and it just was so much fun. Another awesome time at the theater, Challengers. It was so awesome that I saw it in theaters twice, which is something I never do. Both times the theater was packed, everyone was screaming, laughing. You know, it felt like I was on a roller coaster. There was just a feeling of euphoria that permeated around the room. The soundtrack was great. That was a major Oscar snub. And yeah, if I had the time, I would have went to see it a third time too. Earlier this year, I went to see Baby Girl with my high school bestie, and we went to one of those theaters where you can order a little glass of wine, you can be a little fancy, and that was also a 10 out of 10 experience. The movie itself wasn't as thrilling as Saltburn or Challengers, but people in the theater were super giggly and reactive, I think because some of the scenes were a bit uncomfortable to watch with a group of strangers. But you know, by the end, we were all just locked in and cheering for Nicole Kidman's orgasm together, which was beautiful.
Not just entertained, but somehow reborn together.
When I was drawing connections between these theater-going experiences and why they were so memorable to me, like, yes, of course, it was the company I was with and the fact that these filmmakers are really good at their craft. But it was also because these movies were kind of sexy. And we just haven't seen that in a while. Today, I want to talk about the rise of sex scenes in Hollywood lately. An obvious part of this conversation is censorship, which is also such a problem on YouTube that I've had to make my own vocab list for you. So occasionally I'll use the words intimate or redacted instead, or as a callback to North by Northwest, which was censored by the Hays Code, I'll be using the phrase train entering tunnel. All this is a quest to avoid demonetization. It might be fruitless. I won't know whether or not I'm successful until it's too late. So send me your best wishes and let's get into it.
As soon as I heard it was called Baby Girl, I'm like, I want to be the baby girl.
If you've been wanting to launch a website, but you're stressed out by HTML and CSS and whatever kind of coding exists out there these days, Squarespace is a really accessible, easy to use platform to help you get started. They have pre-made templates and a drag and drop tool called Fluid Engine that allows you to configure your page in the simplest way possible. They offer any feature you might need, including storefront capabilities where you can sell anything from products to services. If you're, for instance, running a business like a yoga studio, a hair salon, or any type of consultation service, Squarespace makes it super easy for your clients to book appointments. They also have tools to launch email campaigns to keep you connected with your clients. You can start with an email template and customize it by applying your brand features like site colors and a logo. And of course, you have analytics to track your campaign impact as well. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Minalay to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
This scene's supposed to be in a saloon, but the censor cut it out.
Look, I am holding space for people who don't want to see certain wink, I can't really wink, scenes in movies, you're valid. But I disagree with any rallies to change the industry by completely removing these scenes across all media. I think that's stupid, and as long as all actors are consenting and all participants are warned about the content with rating labels or whatever, then what's the big deal? Also, we've tried censorship before in Hollywood, and it was bad. As I mentioned before, it was called the Hays Code, and it was enforced, though with varying degrees of severity, from 1930 to 1968. The Hays Code was established as a way to appease concerns regarding Hollywood. Many people in the early 20th century were becoming anxious over the role Hollywood played in influencing societal behavior, and that concern reached boiling point in 1921 thanks to multiple scandalous news stories. There was the drug-related death of actor Wallace Reid, the unsolved murder of director William Desmond Taylor, and maybe most high-profile, the court case prosecuting comedy star Fatty Arbuckle for assaulting and killing a woman at a party. As Thomas Doherty recounts in his book Hollywood Censor, Arbuckle's 3 trials solidified Hollywood's reputation as a sun-drenched Sodom, luring Midwest farm girls to a fate worse than waitressing. Major studios panicked. They feared that the federal government would establish a censoring body in Hollywood, similar to what the FDA was for the food industry. As a solution, they decided to set up their own self-censorship body, with the idea being that they could at least maintain some form of autonomy by doing so. The censoring body was called the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, or MPPDA, later called the Motion Picture Association of America, or MPAA. It was made up of all the major studios like MGM and Paramount and was overseen by a man named Will Hays.
Things got so hot in the movies that the reputable producers signed up Will Hays at $100,000 a year to clean up the picture business and yet keep the busybodies off the industry's neck. Anxious reformers thought the movies were overselling girls. Maybe they were. They had some beauties.
Some of these early censorship rules included no cursing, no double beds, no cow milking, no kissing while laying down, no leg touching underneath a table, unless the characters were married, no showing of toilets in bathroom scenes, no off-screen toilet flushing, among many other unreasonable rules. As actor Gary Cooper quipped, "You were allowed to kiss your horse in Westerns, but never your girl." The Hays Code was not strictly enforced for the first 4 years of its introduction, and this was because of the Great Depression. Because of the economic downturn, the movie industry was taking a hit from reduced ticket sales and was frantic for patrons. As Doherty reported, at this time, every studio risked a pink ticket or police raid to lure an audience whose spending was no longer discretionary, who were sometimes choosing between food and film. Let's take a look at 1932, for example. In that year, Paramount's The Story of Temple Drake has a scene depicting a perverted criminal attacking a young girl. Todd Browning's film Freaks, which was produced by MGM, featured a cast of disabled performers whose characters end up mutilating the body of a beautiful villainess. And publicity flyers for the movie Unashamed advertised, 100 will be given to the girl or woman who is unashamed to play the part of Lady Godiva and ride around the public square on a white horse, stark naked at daybreak, Thursday, August 25th. All applicants must state age, whether married or single, name, and address. Anti-Hollywood grassroots movements, mostly headed by religious groups, erupted as a result. Catholics in particular formed the National Legion of Decency in 1933, though upset Jewish and Protestant people could join as well. The Legion published a pledge that they distributed at Sunday Mass, parochial church, and even to Hollywood's horror in front of the movie theater. Eventually, public perception of Hollywood became so negative that the industry surrendered to pressure. It created a code enforcing body called the PCA, which was headed by a man named Joseph Breen.
It may interest you to sit in with us at a meeting of the Production Code Administration in Hollywood, where we are all working for finer and better motion pictures.
If Breen approved of your movie, you would be awarded a code seal of approval. Without this seal, film exhibitors, such as movie theaters, could not screen your film. If they did, they would face a $25,000 fine. Doherty notes in his book, however, that the real danger wasn't the fine itself, but the impaired relationship with major studios, who would blacklist movie theaters playing non-code films. He writes, the whole scheme operated to crush independent competition and keep exhibitors in bondage to the major studios. By 1938, the MPPDA estimated that 98% of films screened had been certified by the Breen office. On top of enacting strict regulations for new movies releasing, Breen also pulled previous high-grossing films out of circulation. One of those films, Red-Headed Woman, only reemerged in 1988 as a restored version for the video market.
And there we were, like an uncensored movie, when in waltzes Mrs. William Legender Jr. and catches us right in the old family parlor.
But some films were completely destroyed, so they couldn't be recovered even when censorship was lifted. The censorship also made sure that movies would fall in line with Catholic beliefs, which film critic Mick LaSalle explains hurt female actors the most. He writes, under the code, actresses lost their edge, their ability to surprise. As one studio executive grumbled, the leading lady must start out good, stay good, and be whitewashed for the finish. Consigned by censorship to a fantasy land of purity, famed actresses lost their social relevance. After all, what is the point of a Kay Francis movie in which Kay Francis is less sophisticated than the viewer? As one critic said, Hollywood buys a good story about a bad girl and has to change it to a bad story about a good girl. Actress Anne Harding couldn't maintain a career in this climate. In 1937, she left Hollywood and went to England to act instead. While screwball comedies provided more complex roles to actresses with good comedic timing, such as Claudette Colbert and Myrna Loy, LaSalle writes, actresses not at home in zany comedy, such as Harding, died the death. In the 40s, we started to see a handful of meaty dramatic roles available for female actresses, though they tended to be pretty formulaic and rigid. As Janine Bassinger writes in her 1993 book, A Woman's View, the code always caught up to female characters at the finish. When the end of the movie came around, the woman was usually dead, punished, or back in the fold, aware of the error of her ways. As an example, the original ending of the 1942 movie Woman of the Year has the journalist couple Tess and Sam on more equal footing, with the idea that Tess can be a career woman and a wife at the same time. She doesn't have to choose. The discussion takes place at a game that they're both reporting on. Sam says to Tess, "Why do you always go to extremes? First you want to be just Tess Harding, and now you want to be just Mrs. Sam Craig. What's wrong with Tess Harding Craig?" Pretty revolutionary for the time, but I guess too revolutionary because the ending that was actually filmed places the discussion in the kitchen, where Tess is trying to cook breakfast for Sam. One of the screenwriters for the film, Ring Lardner, lamented about the changed ending in a 1996 interview. It's impossible that she doesn't know anything about cooking an egg or making coffee. It was done more for laughs than anything else, and it had the effect of saying she was overboard in being a career woman. In effect, it was saying that a woman's place is in the home. We didn't like the fact that it seemed kind of anti-woman in the end. As for Katharine Hepburn, the actress who played Tess, he said, Katharine Hepburn liked the original ending better, but she was under contract to make this picture and to do it the way the producer and director said. And so, although she agreed with us, and still does, that the original ending was better, she had to go along with it.
Why can't you be Tess Harding Craig?
I think it's a wonderful name.
Despite all this, I do still love some of the movies that were created under the Hays Code. There were many misses, but a handful of them are still good and enjoyable to watch, even to today's standards. A lot of them were also very clever with the dialogue and camera work to either get around censorship or to make commentary about it.
I said, who was his dam?
Oh, I don't know, miss. He didn't give it.
For example, one of my favorite movies is the 1959 movie Anatomy of a Murder, directed by Otto Preminger. It's a court drama, and during the case proceedings, they have to discuss a certain object, a pair of underwear. However, before they bring out the garment as part of court testimony, the attorneys nervously approach the judge and whisper to each other about how they should discuss this garment.
There's a certain connotation attached to the word panties. Can we find another name for them?
Afterwards, the judge goes, "For the benefit of the jury, but more especially for the spectators, the undergarment referred to in the testimony was, to be exact, the victim's panties." And then, of course, the entire courtroom bursts into laughter. And afterwards, the judge continues, "I wanted you to get your snickering over and done with. This pair of panties will be mentioned again in the course of this trial. And when it happens, there will not be one laugh, one snicker, one giggle, or even one smirk in my courtroom." This scene is actually so ingenious, especially when you look into the production history of the movie. The PCA had initially redlined a number of words to be taken out of this movie, including the word panties, which they stated in the letter. It also seems to us that there is an overemphasis on the word panties, to the point where this element possibly becomes offensive. The dramatic hoopla over a single word in the courtroom mirrors the way that filmmakers probably thought censors were acting over a single word in their script. And the judge's stern insistence that the word panties is integral to the court case mirrors the filmmaker's insistence that the word panties is integral to the script. So as I said, these films could be really witty, and overall, they just serve as an important part of film history. I want to recognize that while also saying that the production code was harmful. It hurt people's careers, it prioritized religious conservative ideals, and it was a general stain on artistic integrity. And these filmmakers like Alfred Hitchcock and Otto Preminger, who were able to create magic under the code, would maybe have created even better movies if they had faced no constraints at all. The Hays Code couldn't stand the test of time, though. It eroded gradually over the decades, and it's hard to pin down exactly why. There were a few landmark court cases that reduced the power of the PCA. There was the competing threat of television. There were a number of established auteurs who fought the system, like Elia Kazan and Otto Preminger. There was the introduction of foreign cinema. But from reading a few books on the subject, I'd say that most of it was just a gradual shift in public beliefs over time. Maybe part of the shift in attitude was that people just cared more about movies now. As Doherty writes, before World War II, newspaper columnists and literary critics had held Hollywood in such low self-esteem that few considered the Breen office a blight on artistic expression or political discourse. After World War II, the snide disregard turned to grudging respect. Like the rest of the nation, the eggheads of the liberal imagination now looked upon motion pictures as art to cherish and messages to heed. Whatever the case, Joseph Breen ended up retiring in 1954 due to health issues, and then in 1966, Jack Valenti became president of the MPAA, and he actually opposed censorship, announcing during his first site visit to Hollywood, "I did not become president of this organization to preside over a feckless code." Later in the year, Valenti produced a new production code. Under this system, movies would be tagged with a label if they were family unfriendly, but would not be barred from production or exhibition. And 2 years later, the PCA was given an alphabet rating system. The original ratings were G, suggested for general audiences, M, suggested for mature audiences, R, persons under 16 not admitted without a parent or guardian, and X, persons under 16 not admitted. We still use a lettering rating today, but it's a bit different. There's now PG, PG-13, and NC-17, the last of which is considered a death knell because it severely hurts the commercial value of the movie. While the system is considerably better than the production code, there are still issues with it, mainly because I feel like the ratings are very inconsistent and given based more on the vibe of the person who's rating them or the people who are rating them. For example, the 2013 movie Prisoners was at first rated NC-17, but then re-rated R after a bit of editing. I'm pretty sure I saw the R-rated version of that movie, and there were still some pretty sizable torture sequences. Poor Paul Dano. Yet, the 2013 movie Blue is the Warmest Color, which simply had lesbian train-entering tunnel scenes, was rated NC-17, never re-rated. I also think it's interesting that in France, where the movie was filmed, it was rated acceptable for kids above the age of 12 by the French National Center for Cinema and Animated Image. And actually, when a Catholic group tried to sue the Ministry of Culture for its rating, the country's highest administrative jurisdiction, the Conseil d'État, I think I butchered that pronunciation. It's been a while since I was on my French Duolingo, okay? But they ruled in favor of the 12 rating, saying, although true that the sex scenes in question, although simulated, present a character of undeniable realism, they are both free of all violence and filmed without degrading intent. The difference between the US and much of Europe is European attitudes hold that sexual exploration is a normal part of growing up, and kids should be allowed to see it on screen if it's portrayed responsibly. As Betsy Bosdeck, the executive editor of ratings and reviews for Common Sense Media, explains, in general, the US does tend to rate sexuality more harshly than violence, and that is pretty much flipped everywhere else in the world. The other problem with the current MPAA rating system is that it doesn't take into account any kind of context. When it comes to redacted content, it only flags the depiction of these acts and not whether or not they're consensual, whether they're gratuitous versus integral to the story, whether they're educational, which all these things would actually better service parents and guardians who are trying to guide their children's media consumptions. Like if I was a parent, I'd much rather my kid watch Sex Education than Euphoria, but both shows are simply rated TVMA.
I do not intend to pay money to see nudity, obscenity, and degeneracy.
Mrs. Baker, these things are all a part of life.
I thought it was important to talk about the Hays Code to give a sense of what life was like under media censorship. A lot of the online discourse I've seen centers on the so-called Puritans, or a cohort of Zoomers who are, as Rolling Stone describes, incensed by any display of sexuality on the internet. I think the whole Puritan outrage was blown way out of proportion, and that most Zoomers who are aggressively sex negative on the internet are a minority voice within their age demographic. These social media platforms work to elevate the voices of the angriest people because it mines the most engagement. So just because you scroll through like 20 tweets in agreement about a topic doesn't mean that those 20 people are the voices of an entire generation made up of millions and millions of individuals. In saying that, there have been a few studies published about how young people, in America at least, are having less than previous generation. For example, a 2021 survey reported that 38% of Californians aged 18 to 30 had no intimate partners in the prior year, which was a decade high. Another analysis showed that the proportion of young adults who reported having 2 or more intimate partners declined from 23% in 2011 to 10% in 2021. Most academics pin the reasons down to a generational change in socialization. Gigi Engel, a certified relationship psychotherapist, said, Zoomers are much more involved in their devices. They're less likely to meet up in person. I don't know so much that it's a non-interest in redacted as much as it's a socialization thing because everybody's just on their phones and not really meeting up in person as much. The 2023 movie No Hard Feelings played with this stereotype. In one scene, Jennifer Lawrence's character crashes a teen house party, and as she's busting open bedroom doors, she expects to find teens getting it on, but instead finds them sitting next to each other, clothed and scrolling on their phones.
Doesn't anyone fuck anymore?
Despite some militant loud voices, I think the idea is less that Zoomers are wanting to ban train entering tunnel scenes altogether, but that they are looking for stories that speak to their experiences. The UCLA Center for Scholars and Storytellers conducted a 2024 study to understand what young people care about and found that 63.5% of people aged 13 to 24 wanted to see more platonic relationships in their movies and TV shows, while 62.4% thought that intimate content was not necessary for advancing the plot. Yalda T. Ulls, the founder and executive director of the center, told The Ringer, at that age, forming friendships is very often more important than redacted or romance. And when they do want redacted content, they want it to feel authentic to the stories and characters. They don't want to see it shoehorned in. Honora, it would be weird not to have it. If it feels really authentic and real, then they want to see it. But really, even though Zoomers tend to face the most blame, I think the actual man standing behind the curtain for this change in cinema is the industry itself. I mean, the way the industry has felt about train entering tunnel scenes has cycled over the years. For example, the 1970s saw a flood of auteur-driven cinema that was quite explicit, but then the 1980s was much more repressed. Most recently, the 2010s, which abandoned mid-budget movies and instead leaned into blockbuster family-friendly fare, was a very vanilla era as a result. A 2019 Playboy study actually found that only 1 out of every 100 movies released in the 2010s showed people sleeping together, less than any decade since the 1960s, when the Hays Code was still in place, by the way. The Ringer published their own analysis by looking through data from the IMDb Parents Guide, and they found that not only have the numbers of movies tagged as having mild and severe intimate content declined by as much as 30 to 50% from their peaks, but the number of movies tagged as having no intimate content has skyrocketed from less than 100 movies in 2000 to 400 to 500 in the past few years. I've talked about the disappearing mid-budget movie in my rom-com video, but another part of the equation that I didn't really talk about in that video is the impact of foreign markets and how that factors in. So in 2023, only around 30% of ticket sale revenue came from the US. In comparison, in the early 2000s, the number was at 80%. Joshua Lin, president of box office forecasting company Piedmont Media Research, explained not just specifically adult films, but even comedies. You're seeing less of those being made now, theatrically, because those don't travel as well. Comedy doesn't travel as well to other countries. A lot of it is very sort of specific. Where you've got action movies or sci-fi, that travels a lot easier to different countries, to different cultures. Hollywood started depending on foreign markets because US movie attendance was dwindling and DVD sales became obsolete. They specifically sought out China as the solution. In 2012, 7 of the 10 highest grossing movies in China were US made. As a result of this new financial dependency, studios have had to appease Chinese censors, who review every movie before it's granted release in the country. According to a Deadline report last year, only 15 US movies were allowed in China in 2022. The Chinese government also has the power to blackball studios, filmmakers, and actors from the market for an extended period of time for offending them. Richard Gere has alleged that he's blackballed himself due to his activism on Tibet. In a 2017 interview, he said, "There are definitely movies that I can't be in because the Chinese will say, not with him. I recently had an episode where someone said they could not finance a film with me because it would upset the Chinese." Side note, I think what he's saying is valid, but it does make my skin crawl a bit whenever someone says the Chinese, because there's like always a sinister aura around that phrase. They say it so often in that TV show Black Doves that came out recently. In that show, there was always some British official who was like, the Chinese have him. Watch out for the Chinese. The Chinese are hot to us. Like, I feel like the politically correct term would be the Chinese government or the Chinese censors, instead of folding in like the Chinese people into your frustrations. But that's just me. Another thing about the dependency on foreign markets, though, is that you do have to consider their restrictions if you want the movies to be shown there. Lin says China and India, the cultures or the governments might be more restrictive, and so you're not going to see things that are as sexually driven. To give another example of how dependent Hollywood is or was in the 2010s, and these numbers were adjusted for inflation, the original R-rated version of RoboCop grossed $53 million domestically on a $13 million budget. Meanwhile, the 2014 PG-13 rated remake grossed $59 million domestically on a $100 million plus budget, which would have been a pretty severe loss. However, the remake made $184 million internationally, so the movie was saved. This kind of rhetoric actually echoes what Joseph Breen once said. If pictures cost less to make and were aimed at specialized audiences, I'd love to see that sort of thing. A chain of 3,000 to 4,000 theaters as a special outlet for adult audiences. Our trouble in this business is that we're so gated that we try to be all things to all men, youngsters, adolescents, and adults. We could treat certain themes in a more adult manner than we do now if it were not for our mixed audiences. Well, I think the solution then is just to make movies cheaper. Some critics pinned this dilemma also on the Me Too movement, which apparently struck fear in the hearts of male auteurs and made them shy away from intimate scenes altogether. The solution then has been the introduction of intimacy coordinators. Their job is to work with filmmakers and actors to make sure everyone's boundaries are protected and that everyone is on the same page, knowing what to expect ahead of time when filming an intimate scene. But CBC reports, with such exacting planning requirements and tricky conversations regarding consent, some producers may find it easier to just write redacted scenes out, especially because they don't necessarily see the payoff. The end result, for whatever the reason, is a lack of intimacy altogether. Director Yorgos Lanthimos even joked at a press conference during Venice Film Festival ahead of the premiere of his movie Poor Things. It's weird, isn't it? Why is there no sex in movies? While there may be a kernel of truth to the Me Too argument, I don't fully buy it because, ironically, train entering tunnel scenes are still prevalent on TV. Game of Thrones, Bridgerton, White Lotus, etc. The difference for TV, though, is that TV doesn't have to deal with the MPAA ratings and risk getting slapped with the dreaded NC-17 rating. And also, TV shows aren't reliant on foreign box offices. TV is, in general, a less risky investment than movies, so people have been willing to take more risks there, or at least that was the case. But, you know, the TV bubble has definitely burst. I have writer friends who are having difficulty getting work and launching new shows. Also, auditions are really dry for actors right now. So it's just not great at the moment for TV either. And I'm wondering if this will lead TV to becoming more tame over time. I hope not, but I wouldn't be surprised.
You gotta be kidding.
What?
This is a dirty movie.
A man attended the pre-release screening of Challengers in West Hollywood, and apparently after the screening, he yelled with joy, "Sex is back." Ironically, there are no train entering tunnel scenes in Challengers, but we'll discuss that in a second. But yes, the rumors are true, or at least they seem to be. Over the past few years, there's been a slew of popular movies featuring explicit scenes. Poor Things, Oppenheimer, Saltburn, Anora, the list goes on. Again, Saltburn was the first movie that I saw where I was like, the tide is turning. There were just so many TikToks that came out making fun of the watching experience of that film. I also saw a TikTok of someone making a cocktail inspired by that bathtub scene. And there was even a candle going viral called Jacob Elordi's Bathwater, which comes in 3 scents: vanilla bean, sea breeze, and comfort spice. Not sponsored. We are definitely not sponsored by Jacob Elordi's Bathwater. Unless... All these videos and gimmicks undoubtedly added to the movie's success as it got more people wanting to see what everyone else was talking about. The production budget for Saltburn was never officially disclosed, so I can't say whether or not it was a box office success, but it was Prime Video's #1 film over Christmas, and its featured song, Murder on the Dance Floor, was put back on the charts for the first time in 22 years. I think the success of Saltburn goes back to what Yalda Ols was saying. Younger generations are looking for stories that resonate with them. You may be wondering why young people are resonating with the man who humps a grave, but it's more than that. We want to see female characters outside of the male gaze. We want to see homoeroticism. We want to see beautifully styled production sets and costumes, complex heroes, and movies that have deeper and richer meanings. I think if Me Too contributed to anything, it was to the awareness of just how objectified women are in Hollywood. Like, when you rewatch Transformers now, the male gaze is even more obvious, post knowing how Michael Bay treated Megan Fox on set. So with that said, I'm not really surprised by anyone who would instinctually associate any kind of nudity on screen with exploitation, because in so many previous cases, that would be true. But it's just a shame because sex can be such a narrative tool. In the cases of Saltburn, Poor Things, Nosferatu, and Anora, it's symbolic of something larger about society, and it's a tool to characterize the characters and or to move the story forward. In these examples, I would argue that it's actually more of a storytelling device than it is an erotic treat for the audience. Like, we're really not supposed to be turned on by any of Emma Stone's scenes in Poor Things, though no shame if you did find that appealing. Daisy Jones compares one scene as having the same vibe as a gynecology exam in a GQ article about the movie. Emma's character, Bella, just doesn't feel shame. She's completely free with her body, and sexual liberation is a core part of her character journey. So these scenes are pretty necessary to convey that journey to the audience. I don't think it's a perfect movie. Like, I would have loved for Bella to have more body hair, for her to get her period, to show the stereotypically monstrous parts of her womanhood. But I had no issue with the amount of jumping.
Furious jumping. I love that.
In the substance, Margaret Qualley's body is on full display and looks picture perfect. It's poreless, airbrushed to the max, and sort of plastic looking. But these shots of her are non-erotic. Instead, they look pretty uncanny. Most of the shots are also invasive, focusing on a certain part of her body and leaving her face out, which goes to emphasize her character's objectification. All of this was absolutely purposeful to uplift the narrative that Hollywood requires a type of manufactured artificial beauty in its stars. Margaret's body in the substance also reminded me of a viral article written by R.S. Benedict in 2021. In the article, Benedict discusses this beauty optimization culture in Hollywood, specifically in Marvel movies. She writes, actors are more physically perfect than ever. Impossibly lean, shockingly muscular, with magnificently coiffed hair, high cheekbones, impeccable surgical enhancements, and flawless skin. All displayed in form-fitting superhero costumes with the obligatory shirtless scene thrown in to show off shredded abs and rippling pecs. But despite this picture perfection, there's nothing spicy about these films. She goes on to write, Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor utterly lack the sexual chemistry to convince us that either of them would be thirsty enough to commandeer a coma victim's body as they do in Wonder Woman 1984 so they can enjoy a posthumous hookup. In defiance of Norse mythology, Chris Hemsworth's Thor smiles at Natalie Portman like a dumb golden retriever puppy without ever venturing to rend her asunder with his mighty hammer, so to speak. She further draws a comparison to the 80s and 90s when lead actors were still blessed by the gods, admittedly, for their features, but they were overall less manufactured looking and they played characters who also had desires made explicit in the movies. And sometimes the actors weren't even styled to be conventionally attractive, as in the case of the parents in the 1982 film The Poltergeist. But they still experienced desire on screen. Desire is important because it roots a character down to their humanity. Also, being able to watch a character experience desire builds an intimacy between us and that character. It reminds us that we are involved in that character's story, and to get that full story experience means seeing them in moments of vulnerability, of uncomfortability, of pleasure. By removing pleasure from the equation, what purpose is this laser focus on building up these superhero bodies anyway? I guess to be good at their jobs? When Thor gains weight in Avengers Endgame, it's to show he had given up on his job. We see this plastic washing outside of Hollywood too, with productivity culture and self-optimization. Benedict writes, a generation or two ago, it was normal for adults to engage in sports not purely as self-improvement, but as an act of leisure. People danced for fun. Couples socialized over tennis. Kids played stickball for lack of anything else to do. Whatever the ethos behind it, the ultimate goal was pleasure. I don't think Hollywood has caused the productivity culture, so to speak, but at the very least, it is reflecting it. So I hope this tide turning in recent movies is a backlash against the plasticity of human life these days and that it will continue to grow as a trend. Also, I want to add that sex and eroticism are different things, but both are important to cinema. They can work together, of course, but also one doesn't require the other. I would argue that the most erotic films as of late have been less action and more suppressed desire, like Challengers with the churro scene, or The Final Tennis Game, and Baby Girl with the milk drinking scene at the bar. Charlie Squire wrote a great piece on their blog Evil Female in early 2023. In the essay, they make a note on how eroticism is difficult to capture on screen. They write, when people talk about finding most intimate scenes uncomfortable, I think their feelings are largely responding to the social expectation that watching other people be intimate is wrong. I think that's absolutely true. And maybe the success of these low physical contact, high erotic movies, other than the fact that they're made by really talented filmmakers, is because it introduces a feeling of eroticism without making us feel too much like voyeurs. Also, in this day and age when we're so used to quick dopamine rewards and when a romantic story can feel formulaic, having a scene cut off unexpectedly can elicit desire within us as viewers. In Challengers, I assume the guy who yelled "Sex is back" was missing the rush feeling you get watching movies where the unexpected happens. So, what is the reason for this return? Writer Lisa Lohman puts some of it on the aftermath of COVID quarantine, which left people touch-starved. Another reason might be because Chinese consumers have become less profitable to Hollywood studios. In 2023, no American films ranked among the 10 highest grossing in China, despite the highly anticipated sequels in the Mission Impossible, Fast and Furious, and Spider-Man franchises. Political science professor Stanley Rosen made the point, the days when a Hollywood film would make hundreds of millions of US dollars in China, that's gone. The reason for that might be because China's film industry has been growing and Hollywood just can't compete with an industry that focuses on its own domestic tastes and interests. I mean, there's a reason why foreign films aren't more popular here in America. Over the past few months, I've read so many opinion pieces and I've talked to a bunch of my friends, and the consensus seems to be that because Marvel-type blockbuster movies aren't the cash cows that they once were, and because the TV bubble has burst, the result is that we're going to invest in high-quality movies again. I'd love for that to be true more than anyone in the world because I love watching movies. But I think multiple things have to change within the industry first. Namely, we have to prioritize and support independent filmmakers and mid-budget cinema. I mean, making movies right now just isn't profitable, period. Brad Corbet said on a podcast that he has made $0 from directing The Brutalist, which, by the way, has been nominated for 10 Oscars. He's recently also had to shoot a slew of commercials to make ends meet. Under these circumstances, who would want to make a movie, especially one that takes non-commercial risks? But maybe the fact that he still made the movie anyway gets down to the core of the human spirit, and how no matter what the circumstances are, we will create commercially risky art for the sake of creating art that resonates with us. So this is the end of the video. Thank you all so much for listening to me yap about this topic. Hopefully YouTube will play nice with me, but if they don't, just know that I made this video because it's the topic that I'm passionate about and I am not financially motivated. And I am not financially motivated to make it. This video is my Brutalist, okay? Anyways, let me know in the comments how you've been feeling about this change in Hollywood, whether or not you think it's even a change or if it's just like a small little droplet in a larger industry that's not changing. I'd love to hear your opinion about that. If you work in the industry, please tell me, give me some intel, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.